cats and kittens, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The MonkeyBoy Presents the DC Comics Superhero Collection by Eaglemoss, and today I'm very excited to bring you issue number 77, Azrael, and this is a big favorite of mine. I'm a huge Batman fan, love all those characters, and Azrael here is no exception. One of the coolest, in my opinion, character who is severely underrated and who has not really had his due, so it's nice to see him added to this collection. The figure, as you can see here, is the original version of Azrael, the Jean Paul Valley version of the character, whereas, as you'll notice, the cover of the magazine features the latest incarnation, at least at the time, Michael Lane, who had kind of inherited the role of Azrael. The character has really only ever been featured in the comic books until about a year ago. He finally had a cameo in the video game Batman Arkham City, which was really cool to see him. He was very mysterious, very dark. He just kind of appeared every once in a while. So it was really cool to finally see him in something other than the comic book world. As for the character of Azrael, he came into prominence during the storyline known as Nightfall, which also introduced fan favorite villain Bane to the world. After Bane broke Bruce Wayne's back, Azrael took over as Batman and was a much darker, much more violent interpretation of the character. But of course, we'll cover all of that and more in the magazine, which will tell us everything we need to know about the character of Azrael and the few different people that have actually carried that title. And then we'll look at the figure itself, covering the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's a really nice figure. I like it a lot because I'm such a huge Batman fan, so I'm a little partial to it. Don't know if it's for everyone. We'll get there in just a little while. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy issue 77 of the DC Comics Superhero Collection by Eaglemoss, Azrael. First up, the character section. This is where we learn the title of Azrael has actually been handed down from father to son for generations, dating all the way back to the Crusades during medieval times. The title of Azrael was created by an ancient religious sect known as the Sacred Order of Saint Dumas, a spin-off of the Knights Templar. By the 21st century, Azrael is a man named Ludovic Valley, who has been charged by the Order to bring down their former leader, a man named Carlton Leha, because he had stolen a vast portion of their fortune from them. Unfortunately, Leha was ready for the Order's avenging angel, and Azrael barely escaped the confrontation with his life. After finding his long-lost son Jean-Paul and giving him a packet with instructions to find a man in Switzerland named Nomaz, Ludovic passed away and hoped that the mantle of Azrael had been passed on to his son. After completing his training successfully, Jean-Paul became the new Azrael, donning his father's armor with a few modifications, and went back to Gotham City, where he discovered Batman had kidnapped Bruce Wayne and was on a killing spree. Not long after this, Batman was crippled in an attack by the villain known as Bane in a storyline called Nightfall. When the now crippled Bruce Wayne set out to try and heal from his injuries, he left the mantle of Batman to Jean-Paul with one condition, that he not try to take on Bane alone. Jean-Paul as Batman became more and more violent, a side effect from his conditioning and training within the system. As such, he designed the Batsuit to reflect his harder and more violent edge, and took on Bane not once, but twice before finally defeating him. rescued by Batman, a guilt-stricken Jean Paul moved to Suicide Slum and began to work as a volunteer in a men's shelter as a type of penance for his behavior. After purging the Order's evil influence from his system, Jean-Paul once again donned the Azrael armor and joined forces with a woman known as Sister Lily, another former Order member. The last couple pages introduce us to the man that became Azrael after Jean-Paul's death. We learn that hundreds of years ago, the Order of St. Dumas had a splinter group known as the Order of Purity, who forged a suit known as the Suit of Sorrows from pieces of armor that belonged to fallen crusaders. The Order of Purity then recruited a man known as Michael Lane, a former Gotham University football player and Marine, who is now a detective in the Gotham City Police Department. On his first day as Azrael, Michael Lane actually crossed swords with Talia al Ghul, daughter of Ra's al Ghul, who was trying to take the Suit of Sorrows for her son. Next, we look at a couple of Azrael's classic stories. First up, Sword of Azrael, issues 1 through 4. And this is the story that introduced Azrael into the DC universe. We learn the legend of Azrael, we meet Ludovic Valley, we see his demise, and him tracking down his son Jean-Paul just before he passes away. We then travel with Jean-Paul to Switzerland, where he is indoctrinated into the system, he learns of the Order of St. Dumas, and eventually becomes the latest incarnation of Azrael, and meets Batman along the way. It's beautifully illustrated, and if you want to know everything there is to know about the original Azrael, this is the 4-issue series to pick up. We also have Batman, Nightfall. And this storyline followed the events of the death of Superman, and while the DC is still reeling from losing the Man of Steel, it suddenly loses Batman after his back is broken by a new villain known as Bane. As Bruce Wayne travels the world trying to heal, he leaves the mantle of Batman to newcomer Jean-Paul Valley, formerly Azrael, and he becomes a much darker, more violent, and unsympathetic version of Batman. He changes the Bat costume completely, incorporating bits of the Azrael armor into it, and eventually becomes so out of control that it takes Batman and most of the Bat family to stop Jean-Paul in his tracks. Azrael's Friends and Foes takes a look at his mentor, Batman, his ally against the Order, Sister Lily, and the villainous Bane. Finally, the Iconography section looks at some of the other dangerous cults, like the Order of St. Dumas, that are in the DCU. It first looks at some cults that existed thousands of years ago, including a cult that worshipped assassination known as the Reincarnators, a group of Native American warrior shaman who used their abilities to fight against an evil serpent god and its acolytes. It also talks about some modern-day cults, like a cult that was led by a villain known as Joshua, who even managed to put Black Canary under his spell for a short time. The cult known as La Salagia, also known as the Eighth Deadly Sin Sect, who practiced the religion of crime. Finally, it looks at a cult based around the power of resurrection, who actually enticed Wonder Girl to join their ranks after she had lost her boyfriend Superboy during the Infinite Crisis. Here we have Azrael, and this is another really nice figure in the line. He is unfortunately not one of the best in my opinion, but he is really cool. There are some really great details going on here. I love his cape and cloak. It's absolutely fantastic. It's also one of the most fragile in the entire line for these reasons right here, these weird frilly thingies or whatever those would be called that come up off the cape. As you can see, as awesome as they are, it does make him very fragile, especially since this is not made out of lead. The cape and cowl and all of this stuff is made out of resin, which makes it even more fragile, unfortunately, but it's a great touch. Love all the little details that are here. I wish there was more, that's all. I wish the pose was maybe a little bit different, although I really do like this pose a lot. It's very knightly somehow. He looks like an old-time Knight of the Round Table or something like that. Do love all the armored details. His gauntlets are really great. They're big and huge, and there's all sorts of detail going on there. I do like the fact that he has his sword in front of him and the hands resting on top of it. You can see his utility belt, and the red of his suit is also really nice. There's a great whoosh that just shows off all the great little details, the musculature. I just wish, I guess, that we could see more of his chest, more of the costume, because it is such a cool costume, the Jean-Paul Valley version, of course, which is what we have here. The Michael Lane version is also available for those of you who are interested. He's part of the chess collection that Eaglemoss is doing now. But this version right here, I really do like it. The good definitely outweighs the bad, which we'll look at here in just a moment. Azrael stands atop the classic DC logo, and the underside of his base features his name and serial number. To help give you a sense of size and scale, here he is next to the special edition figure of Bane, his co-star from the Nightfall series. And a nice group shot with every member of the Bat family Eaglemoss has released so far. Azrael is a wonderful addition to the line. I really like this figure a lot. He is just shy of being outstanding, but what is here is really cool. The good definitely outweighs the bad. So let us begin with the good. I really like the paint, the application. I really do love the pose a lot. The cape and cowl are also really outstanding. As you can see, especially on the lower body, that's where you can see the whoosh of this character, and the red of the costume really shows off every detail of the musculature. I like how it looks like a textured type of fabric as well. The cape is not black. It's almost like a really deep maroon type of color. It's got some red in there, has some really nice texturing, really nice swirling. Again, it looks like cloth, and I love those big frilly fringy things on the shoulders. I don't know how to describe them other than to call them that. There's great coloration. You can see the underside is a brighter red, much like the inside of his cape is that same shade of red. The sword, I think, is a great touch since he does use it, and I always love it when they include the character's weapons if they can. The utility belt, really nicely detailed. All of the gold on him is a great metallic fleck. That includes the sword, and the sword itself has a silver blade, and it's slightly edged. It has a great sculpt going on there. Really looks cool. Love how his hands are folded on top of it. You can see, too, the gauntlets have those, just the 3 fingers, just like in the comic book, which I think is a fantastic touch. And all of the detailing on the gauntlets is really cool. You can see all the paneling, little pockets and pouches and buttons and gizmos all over them, which is really cool. Love the shoulder pads, love the arms. Also really love the medallion on his shoulder where the cloak supposedly attaches to the rest of the costume. And I finally really dig the head sculpt. It's simple, yes, because there's not much to see. You know, his whole face is covered, but what is there is really cool. You can see it's a nice black. I love how they shadowed his face inside of that cloak. It doesn't really bleed, it doesn't look bad, it's just really nice. The eyes are great. The hood, the way it hangs over his head is great with that little peak. Love the wrinkling, and I love the red portion over the mouth. It's great. It just screams Azrael. Moving on to the bad, and aside from the typical bleeding here and there, which is typical, like I said, of these figures, It's a criticism I have, I guess. I like what's here, I really do, but I wish the pose was a little bit different, showing off the armor a little bit more, maybe showing off the gauntlets and how they have the blades in them, maybe give one of them that flaming detail while the other hand is wielding his sword. I don't know. I mean, I like this, but I feel they could have done a little something more with the figure and with the character. Finally, the Ugly. He is a very fragile figure, actually. You have to be very careful of those fringy things on his shoulders coming off the cloak. It is made of resin, as I said, so they're like a hard plastic. Very easy to break those guys. Don't want him to fall. Also, the sword that he's holding is extremely thin, easy to crack, easy to break. Be very, very careful. He comes packaged in a lot of styrofoam, too, so also be careful removing him from his blister box. Overall, I really do like this figure a lot. I do have criticisms, as I said, like the pose. I wish it was a little different. I wish that his blades were showing off a little bit, but I do like the pose that is here. I just wish you could see more of his suit, but it's great having another member of the Bat family. It's nice to have another Nightfall character from that storyline where Bane broke Batman's back. I'm a big fan of that series, but he's a great character, very obscure. I think you should pick him up if you're a fan of Batman and all of his cast of characters, or you're just a fan of this character in particular. Otherwise, you could probably skip him because, as I said, he is very fragile, and there are probably more well-known characters that you'd rather invest in. But I like him a lot. And I hope you have liked this review of Azrael a lot. Please stay tuned for a quick teaser trailer of the next issue in the series, number 78. Another hero, another female, and we are finishing up the trio that founded the Legion of Superheroes with this next one, so please stay tuned for that. As always, I'm your host, the Monkey Boy, aka Jay to his friends. Thanks for watching.